Like Tim said, I'm Bethany Jenkins. I am from New York City, where I've lived for about 12 and a half years. But a lot of people don't know, in fact, a lot of my closest friends don't know, that I actually have roots right in the area. My mom grew up on Hawthorne Boulevard, really close by, went to Glenbard West High School, and my grandfather was employee number 6 at a little-known moth-proofing company that later became ServiceMaster that was founded by a man named Marion Wade, who hired my grandfather right after World War II. So yesterday I was able to visit the Wade Center and visit that. Of course, Lewis's wardrobe was there. So it was a great experience, and it's an honor for me to be with you guys. Today, I want to talk to you about something, probably the biggest creative problem that you will have to solve in your life, which is how to find a career, how to decide what job you're going to do. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are thinking about that all the time, probably seniors, a little more than freshmen at this point, because May is coming upon you, and as my old boss used to say, that baby is going to be born. So you're going to have to graduate. Today I want to talk to you about this idea that so often college students have, that there are 2 questions that are pretty much the same. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? And the response, if you don't know that answer, is usually, well, what are you passionate about? And today I want to talk to you about why that passion hypothesis is actually really faulty and what instead can be in its place. So I'm going to start off by listing 8 reasons why the passion hypothesis, the idea that you do follow your passion, and if you first find your passion, and then you can find a career that matches your passion, and that should be the way you do it. I'm going to talk to you about 8 reasons why that's not a good model to follow. The first is that we want the wrong things, and we want the right things for the wrong reasons. So you guys are taking classes, I'm sure, with Augustine in Confessions, and you've read some of the prophets where Jeremiah says that our hearts are deceptive above all, who can tame them? And then you hear from Augustine that we have disordered loves. And so I go to Redeemer Presbyterian in New York City, and my pastor, Tim Keller, often talks about idols. And Augustine talks about how our hearts are idol factories. And so we want the wrong things. So this passion idea, what are you passionate about, actually can get really twisted pretty easily. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is there's no evidence that people have pre-existing passions. Most of you guys are vocationally very nimble. You could do a great number of things. The only choice is, what are you going to do? So this idea that there's one passion you must follow and find it is actually not very helpful. Number 3, there's no evidence if you love doing something, you're going to love doing it for a job. I love running, and I run marathons, and there's no way anybody would pay me to run. I think my mileage right now, I just did a 14-miler on Sunday, and it was 9 minutes, 5 seconds. Elite athletes are running like 6-minute miles. It's laughable how slow I run compared to them. No one will pay me for it. But I love doing it. Does that mean that I shouldn't do it? No, it's called a hobby. So we all have hobbies. That doesn't necessarily mean that if we love something, we're going to have to find a job in it. Number 4, the passion hypothesis is pretty self-centered. It's all about you. Instead of asking what you can do for the world, it asks, what can the world give to me? And that type of mentality, walking through life, it's actually going to make you hyper aware of what you don't like about something, because the expectation that it will fulfill you is really high. Number 5, most people aren't 100% sure they found their true calling. Even people who love their jobs, they're going to tell you that they love their jobs, but they're not 100% sure. Challenge me, ask people around you. They will say that that's the case. It certainly has been for me. 6, it's too much emphasis on occupation over vocation. So often we equate, what are you gonna do? What's your passion about? That so often just applies straight to the job. But you guys are gonna be so much more than just what your job title is. You're gonna be sisters, you're gonna be brothers, you're gonna be spouses, you're gonna be parents maybe one day, you're already children, you're classmates, you're a friend. I could go on and on. And I'm so many things too. I'm an aunt, and I've been so many occupations. I'm a lawyer by trade. So this idea that you need to follow your passion and equating that with an occupation is actually very narrow-minded in terms of all the various things God's going to call you to be in the world. 7, it's pretty anxiety-filled. It leads us to this idea that there's one path and that God has this secret thing that he has for you. And if you find it, then you'll be on plan A. But if you don't find it, oh no, door number 2. And that is just a lot of pressure for you to have to figure that out. And so it actually doesn't help. And the last thing, number 8, is actually really applicable to college students, because entry-level jobs are not going to be filled with challenging problems. You're not going to get a lot of autonomy. You're more likely going to be asked to change the water cooler than you are to change the world. My first job after college, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I basically started off as an intern in my congressman's office, Joe Scarborough. And after 3 months, he offered me a position that was higher, but no one was asking me to write policy when I was an intern. No one was asking me to speak in front of Congress. I was doing whatever they asked me to do. And so often I think we get these, especially seniors, you guys are in this pinnacle, you're the oldest here, and you're running and leading a lot of things, and you're about to enter a place where you will be the lowest, and it's gonna be hard. And you will have gotten this big vision of vocation, which is wonderful, but it's not gonna match up with the day-to-day reality that you're gonna have in your first job. That doesn't mean it doesn't come later. It just means don't put so much pressure on that first job. Don't put the pressure of my passion has to be in it. So I've kind of given you 8 reasons why the passion mindset isn't great. And I could just walk off and say, stop doing that. But I'm actually going to give you a different mindset that replaces it. Because I believe not only do we say no to things, but we say yes to something else. And so I want to tell you guys that this is not a secret kind of mindset, and it's just something that I call pretty simply a disciples mindset. And so because work is one of the best ways we love our neighbors, I actually want to go back to one of the passages that actually talks about love the most, and that's in John 13. It's the Last Supper. Jesus is preparing the disciples to go out, and he knows what they don't know is that he's going to be taken before he's going to be crucified the next day, and it's his last time with them. And so this is basically him saying, what in a nutshell do I want my disciples to know about what it means to be my representatives in the world? So this is this beautiful last passage of his, and I'm just going to talk about the part where he washes their feet. I'm going to read it. If you guys have your phones or your Bibles with you, you can read it with me. It's John 13, 4 through 17. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." But Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If then your Lord and teacher have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." So from this passage, I'm going to look at 3 things about a disciple's mindset that applies to vocational exploration. I'm going to look at a disciple loves people, a disciple pursues faithfulness, a disciple has a bias towards action. So first, a disciple loves people. For those of you who guys don't know, at King's College, I often remind students of this, 70 to 80% of the job market is hidden. That means that 70 to 80% of jobs are never posted. They're never posted online. So what does that mean for you? That means that how do you get access to that 70 to 80% of jobs that you'll never see? You actually need to get to know people. That's how it happens. So people hire friends and trusted acquaintances. That's how people get jobs. So what happens when you know this, you start to realize people are actually very important for this career exploration, this job search idea. That's great, it's true. But as soon as your brain starts to register that that's the reality, you start to see people as contacts, and you start to see people as connections, and they stop being people. They actually start being transactional people that you need to use in order to get what you need to get, which is a job. So that's the danger. My pastor has been preaching on this passage, and one of the things he talked about just this Sunday on this passage about loving people is he said that all of us are little bundles of need. All of us walking around. We need approval, we need power, we need control, comfort, and success. When someone feels popular, we like to be around them because we like to feel popular. They have a lot of friends. It's about us, really. If they have a lot of achievements, then we're friends with them, we feel successful. So really, the reason why, and then we say to them things like, I love you because of how you make me feel. That's not about them, that's about you. You're seeing them as an extension of who you are, and that is not love, actually, and it's not the biblical love. C.S. Lewis calls this hunger, actually. In the Screwtape Letters, he writes, "Even in human life, we have seen the passion to dominate, almost to digest one's fellow, to make his whole intellectual and emotional life merely an extension of one's own. On earth, this desire is often called love. In hell, I feign they recognize it as hunger." So what happens is we see the other person and we start to devour them for our own purposes. We eat them. We become cannibals of other people who they are. They're not made in the image of God for his purposes anymore. They become resources for us to get what we want, particularly jobs, when we know that we need to know people to get them. But this passage actually teaches us that real love is washing feet. It is not asking, how can you serve me? It is asking, how can I serve you? And it often is gross and disgusting. Jewish slaves weren't even allowed to be commanded to wash feet. That's how below that was. And here is the King of the universe washing dirty feet. This often feels like death when we subordinate our interest to someone else's, because we have to basically say, I'm not going to say exactly what I want. I'm going to put their needs above mine. It feels like death. But ironically, as the cross teaches us, anything that has death leads to life. And so we have to look at people not for who they are to us, but for who they are to God, and to love them. So how does this change your vocational career approach? When you meet people who you think might be great helps to you in your careers, don't start off telling them about your qualifications and your dreams and your hopes. Ask them about theirs. Ask them about their stories, how they got to where they are, what they're doing, what hopes and dreams did they have when they started. Ironically, that conversation, when they start first, the moment that you get to talk, you're actually able to say, oh, I can actually help you with that. The more they tell you what they need in their work, you actually are able to put yourself in a position to tell them how you can help them with their need. So it actually works out really well, because instead of starting with you, you're starting with them. Actually, if you guys were here on Monday, I watched the chapel talks just to see if I could maybe help out and connect some of these things. And I think Jeremy Courtney's talk actually talked about this in some ways. He started off thinking about himself first instead of thinking about the people he was serving. And really, his whole life shifted when he realized that love is not saying, how can you serve me? It says, how can I serve you? And his ministry has really taken off because of that shift in perspective. Second point, a disciple pursues faithfulness. The question of what do I want to do for the rest of my life is actually not a great question to ask. Your life cannot be perfectly planned. You are not omniscient. That is an incommunicable attribute of God, that he has omniscience and you do not. So you do not know what the future holds. He does. We have wisdom and we have discernment that he has given us, and those are good enough because he says, look at me, and that's who we follow. There is no dream job, or as one of my mentors says, there is no job charming. like no Prince Charming. Millennials are on track to change jobs every 1 year and 8 months. So the likelihood of you saying, what am I going to do for the rest of my life, is actually a really unlikely question at all. Most of us, I said, are vocationally nimble. I graduated college, I moved to DC, I worked in Congress for 4 years, and then I worked as a Bush presidential appointee at the State Department. I then moved to New York to work on Wall Street at the New York Stock Exchange. I then went to Columbia Law School and have a law degree. I became an entrepreneur in law school and launched a nonprofit, and I've now worked in faith-based nonprofits for the past 5 years at the King's College for 2 and the Gospel Coalition for 3. So I wish this were a little more interactive, because I would ask you, what do you think my major is? Because I guarantee you wouldn't know. I majored in Spanish and International Studies. You are not married to your major. Only 27% of people in the world do something in the field related to their major. Mark Zuckerberg's major, the founder of Facebook, psychology. Who knows what's in store for you? Michelle Obama, sociology. See, so you can do anything. Even the guy who yelled out, yes, maybe First Lady. The reality is, it does not matter how you start. What matters is what you do once you start. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. The key is to work hard, or as a disciple mindset, to pursue faithfulness. And I think there are 2 ways that we pursue faithfulness in our work. One is that we, actually before I do that, what faithfulness looks like is back to John 13, where Jesus says, what does he say? He says, focus on me. He says, I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. So he's always the focus. That's the faithfulness. And in two ways, I think that works out with work. One, we have a faithfulness that we work unto him. Colossians tells us, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not men. This means that we should be doing deep work, not superficial work, but deep, thoughtful work. Be innovative in our space, wherever we are, whether as a lawyer, a journalist, a doctor, whatever you guys are planning, a factory worker. It's not all white-collar work. So whatever you're going to do, you should work unto the Lord. Competence at your job will lead to more control and autonomy at your job. So get really good at small things. Luke 16 says, one who is faithful in a very little is faithful in much. At King's, one of the things we say is that professionalism is the new participation grade. So we have participation grades that are related to professional ethics, because we know that when you get into your career, so much of your testimony will be just about how faithful you do small things. I got a great question. I kind of tested out this talk with some students back in New York. And I had a question at the end, which I'm so thankful she asked. And she said, Bethany, with all this talk about passion not mattering, I actually really care about anti-sex trafficking work. I really love International Justice Mission. What do you mean when you say that passion doesn't matter? Because I actually really do care about these things. I feel like God has laid it on my heart. I said, that's a great question. Do I think that that's a bad thing to care about a cause? I don't think it's a bad thing at all. But let me tell you something. We had, how many of you guys know Charity Water? Scott Harrison. He came on campus last year, and he said, one of the things he said to our students was he said that everyone who wants to work for Charity Water loves the cause, which is to bring clean water. They love the cause. But you know what's hard to find? People who are good at skills. And it doesn't matter. Charity Water doesn't want to just hire people Charity Water, like any good cause, doesn't want to hire just people who care about their cause. That's a given. They want to hire people who have something to give to that cause that can further that cause. So if your thing is law, and that's the tool you want to use to help anti-sex trafficking, get really good at law. If you want to use the tool of being a good social media person to get out to do cause work like that, get really good at doing that. Get really good at something that actually, when you go to those places, you have been faithful in the little skills and you've done really well, that when you go to those nonprofits, those causes, you say to them, I can contribute this for you. And also, the other thing I said to her was, don't assume it's going to be your full-time job, even if you love a cause. I love International Justice Mission, and I sit on the dinner committee every fall in New York City, and I help raise money for them. But that doesn't mean it's my job. It just means that's my heart. And again, just because you love something doesn't mean it has to be your job all the time. I challenge you to whatever cause is on your heart right now, love it with all your heart. Don't assume it will be your job. There are lots of things you can do. I often say to students that their vocational imagination is limited by their vocational exposure, which means you need to find out what's out there, and a lot of times you don't. So the other way we pursue faithfulness is we pray unto him too. So we work unto him and we pray unto him. There is no better quote in my mind, and I'm just going to read this, when you're making a decision about a job or a job change, then Kevin DeYoung has a great little book called Just Do Something. And in it, he talks about a career change that he was making, whether to stay at his church or to go to a different church. And this is what he said. This is how he prayed. I prayed a lot about the decision, but I didn't ask God to tell me what to do. Already when I'm reading that, I'm like, well, what did you pray for, Kevin? So what did I pray for? Okay, we're tracking. I prayed that God would make me honest in my interviews. I prayed that I would see a true picture of this church and that they would see a true picture of me. I prayed mostly that my heart would be right, that I wouldn't be motivated by pride, either to stay because it was a big church or to move because I would be senior pastor. I prayed that I wouldn't make a decision based on fear, what if I fail, or pleasing people, will I let down the search committee. I prayed that I would make a decision based on faith, hope, and love. I think that is a great prayer to pray. God is far more concerned that your eyes are on him than what particular job title you're going to have. And that's true for the rest of your life. And so faithfully, when we keep our eyes on him, he says, do as I have done, wash people's feet. That's your focus on faithfulness. The last point, a disciple has a bias towards action. When passion is superficial, you have interests instead of demonstrated interests. But here, which is the difference between running and running a marathon. But here, loving isn't merely a feeling, but an action. It is embodied. We want to be people who actually don't just say we love things, we actually do the things we love. And we actually have the same thing the way that we walk equals the way that we talk. I hate quoting things like that, but it's actually true in this case. The data to make good decisions about your vocations is actually found in the real world. You need to consider your classroom as where you learn, and the city where you go out and do internships and you talk to people as your lab. You want to test your assumptions of what you're learning in class and what you're going out and doing, and then come back to class, and often have this movement where you're doing that, and you're having those conversations. Disciples don't sit back and feel, we think and we act. I have a couple more minutes, just a few, and I want to talk. I'm going to skip a little bit from there. And I want to talk about how you get the power to be this kind of disciple with the disciple's mindset. Is passion all bad, or is there a place for it? If we return to the upper room, to the washing of the disciples' feet, we remember that the next day, Jesus was he walked the Via Dolorosa, and he cried, and he was spit upon, and he wore a crown of thorns as a mockery. And often we hear this called the Passion of Christ. And that is based on the fact that he had a passion too. He loved you, and he wanted to have a relationship with you. Isaiah 53:10 says, when his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. That's you. Out of the anguish of his soul, he shall see and be satisfied. Hebrews 12:2 says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. That joy was you. I want you to see that his passion was for you and for you to know him, and in that light, then turn around and love others. And I want you to see that he had a disciple's mindset, these three qualities too. He loved you not for what you offered him, but for who you were. He pursued faithfulness, little faithfulness, even obedient to the point of death. And he had a bias toward action too. For he not merely said he loved us, but he died on the cross to show us. And he didn't have to do it in small ways, because remember what he said to Simon Peter? He said, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." We have to do little tiny tests of things, which I call prototypes, to know what we want to do in the future, but he knew what the future was going to hold, and he still did it. Once you see that, once you see his beauty, his passion for you, then out of the overflow of your heart, you can turn around and do these things. That is how I want you to live as you pursue your vocational choices and how you explore and make those choices. Live out of that overflow, and then you can have a disciple's mindset towards your vocational exploration. Thank you for having me.